everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today we are going to make a foaming facial cleanser that targets acne-prone skin. So we are going to use a combination of surfactants today in order to achieve a nice, clear, foaming product. I'm going to start by going in with my SCMI surfactant, which comes in little flakes similar to how an emulsifier would come. Now you would assume that this would create kind of a creamy looking product, but it does not. It creates a beautiful clear product. Now, if you're new to making foaming products, with any product, actually, not just foaming products, with absolutely any product, the steps that you mix in are just as important as the formulation itself. So now I'm going to go in with my Cocomid Apropyl Betaine. Forgive me if I'm not the best at pronouncing things. And then I'm going to add some Biotiers AS40. I have a really big, jug of this, so it's hard for me to show on camera. And now I am going to add my cocoa glucoside. And now I'm going to add some PEG 6 caprylic capric triglyceride, which is a nice emollient. That is great for foaming products. Works as a super fatting agent. Okay, so this is our first phase, which I'm going to set aside while I prepare our next phase, and then we will get into the heating of our surfactants. So our next phase I'm going to do in a plastic beaker because it will be poured into this eventually. Okay, so I have added disodium EDTA to this. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and weigh out our phase B. I'm going to start by just adding my preservative here. I'm using Liquid Germal Plus for this. I generally use it when I create formulas for others to follow along to. The reason being, it's available everywhere and it works well. I am starting to kind of phase it out of my follow-along formulations just because it's only stable to 40 degrees Celsius. I know there's a couple US suppliers that are phasing it out of their inventory. So I will be moving to a Cosmo approved preservative that is stable to a higher temperature, so that those of you that live in warm states or tropical climates, lucky you, will have formulations that are stable at much higher temperatures. Now, I also have added disodium EDTA, which I suggest you add to a lot of your foaming products. Now for my videos, I use a very small, very affordable scale. I do when I'm making products outside of video, which is more often than I do on video. I have a much bigger scale. I am putting together a equipment video for all of you guys. Okay, and now I'm adding my glycerin, which is a humectant, as most of us know. And my propane dial. I love propane dial. It's one of my, it's probably my favorite humectant. I also like propylene glycol for my facial products, but it's a great humectant because it doesn't provide the stickiness that glycerin does, or if you combine them together, it eliminates the stickiness that glycerin can sometimes give off. Okay, so we're targeting acne today. I'm using willow bark extract, which is the natural substitute for salicylic acid. It's phenomenal for acne-prone skin, which all of my kids are at the age that they have started to get a little bit of acne. So I've used it at a pretty high percentage, so that even though this is a wash-off product, I like to get a lot of it in there. And the reason being, I have purchased the liquid extract. You can also purchase this in powdered form. I personally don't like formulating with very many powdered extracts. A lot of the natural ones change the color of your formulation, and it turns it like a brownie color, which just isn't appealing to look at. So you've got to always take into account when you're purchasing a liquid extract, you want to look at how much active content you're going to have in your formulation. So just something to consider when you are working with natural extracts. Okay, so now we are going to add our water. So these, I'll show you guys this. I think I've showed you guys this in other videos, but I use these for my water. They're fantastic because distilled water generally comes in huge jugs, and it's so easy to over pour your water. With these, you can get such a precise amount because it distributes such a little bit at a time. So what I do is I remove the cap and I pour majority of the water phase in, and then at the end where I've got, you know, a couple grams left to add, I move over to the little sprout, and it ensures that I don't over pour and ruin my formulation. So we now have our 2 phases. I have made this product, if you've been following me for any amount of time, you know that most of my facial products are fragrance-free. And that is because I personally have sensitivities to some fragrances. Essential oils can actually have higher allergen profiles than fragrances do. So I can stand some fragrances and some essential oils, but not all of them, and I know so many others have sensitivities to them, so I try to take that into account when I'm formulating. Okay, so now we are going to heat our phase A. If you don't have an overhead stirrer, foaming products and gel products are going to be a little bit more challenging for you. The reason being, when you stir a foaming product, air is incorporated into the product, which is what causes the foam. So when you are stirring by hand, you're a lot more susceptible to air entering the product and it foaming. The other thing with foaming products is that the mixing is so critical in the formulations. So many times people have formulated a product, a foaming product, where all of the materials are compatible. The product's just not being mixed correctly. And the other thing is when you upscale. It is really difficult to upscale surfactant-based formulations without an overhead, because you are just not, it's really difficult to mix a large batch by hand and mix it properly. So that being said, I am going to be using my overhead today for this. So today we're not heating, usually we heat to very specific temperatures. Today we're not. We're heating to those large surfactant flakes melt. I'm going to be using a propeller shaft for my overhead today, which again, I am going to do a an equipment video for you guys and kind of break down beginner equipment, intermediate equipment, and things that I would suggest when you are starting to purchase a little bit more expensive of equipment, what I think you should purchase and invest your money in first. Now my son has told me that I need to start doing voiceover videos for you guys. I'm gonna take his advice because he's 14 and he knows a lot more about social media than I do. So he is going to teach me how to do those voiceovers so that the quality of these videos is a lot better for all of you. So while this is heating, you're gonna wanna stir it. You can also do this in a double boiler setting. If you are using a double boiler, just make sure that your water in the pan below isn't too high. Because when it's too high, and say you're using a smaller beaker than this one, I'm making a 300 gram product. I generally stay 500 grams and under for videos so that it doesn't take forever for everything to melt and process. But if you are doing a smaller amount and choose to do it in a smaller beaker and you're using the double boiler method, you want to make sure that the water that's in that lower pan doesn't boil to the point that it's splashing, because it can then splash into the product. And if it does splash into the product, unfortunately, you have to throw the product away because it's going to ruin the product entirely, even if it's only a couple drops. So just take that into account. If you do want to invest in hot plates, do not buy a magnetic stir, buy hot plates. These are like 25 bucks Canadian. I'm sure they're cheaper on Amazon, like in America, because y'all get everything cheaper than we do. Buy hot plates, because magnetic stirrers, particularly off Amazon, are hit and miss. I've bought 3. One lasted longer than 2 months. One I had to throw out my second time using it, and the second one after about 2 weeks. Secondly, for a good magnetic stir, you're going to be looking at a few $100s. And the mixing part is only really, magnetic stirrers are used to mix liquids. So you won't be able to really mix products that have any type of viscosity. Okay, so we are almost there, not quite. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to put this under my overhead, so I'll readjust the camera so that I can show you guys what to do next. Okay, so I've got this. You can see it stirring at a really low RPM. And now I've got my water phase, which I'm going to add in increments. Now I will up the stirring power a little bit once I've got everything in there. Okay, and I am going to leave this to mix for about 15 or 20 minutes. Okay, so this has been mixing for about 25 minutes, it is ready. You'll notice there is foam on the top. That will go away once it sits without being mixed for a little while. And then we'll move on to the thickening phase. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the video. I let this product sit overnight so that the bubbles would completely go away, and we're left with a nice, beautiful, crystal clear product. We are now going to thicken the product. Now, you could stop here. You don't have to thicken the product. You could use a foamer bottle at this point, put the product into the foamer bottle, and it would be fine, thin like it is now. If you want to create a beautiful gel cleanser like we are going to do today, we will be thickening the product. I'm going to use Sepimax Zen. I have a huge thing of it. I just like to put, I get these little bottles so that when I am doing a video, I don't have to carry out a huge thing of it. So we are going to use Sepimax Zen to thicken this. The reason I'm choosing this over a gum like xanthan gum or Sola gum or Silly Gel is because it creates a clearer product. The gums don't. So this also, if you wanted to add some jojoba beads or an exfoliant of any type, it also does suspend particles, which is fantastic. Now, you add, with a gum, you would have to slurry the product in order to add it to the, sorry, I always get lost for words on these videos. You would have to slurry it before adding it to the surfactant-based product here. With Sepimax Zen, it's fantastic because you don't have to slurry it. So I'm going to show the other reason that that Sepimax is great is you don't need an overhead for it. The only difference between making this product without an overhead and with an overhead is time. With Sepimax Zen, if you don't have an overhead, the product is going to take a lot longer to hydrate. So what I do before I had an overhead and I worked with this, I would make my products that included Sepimax Zen in the evenings. I'd wet and I will show you what wetting is. I have done it in another video, but in case you haven't seen that, I'm going to show you here. I would wet the product. So you add the product, the raw material here. You can use a spatula. You could use a fork, works great. Unfortunately, I just don't have forks that I haven't used in my kitchen. So I'm going to use a spoon. So wetting the material, I'm going to zoom you guys right in. See how when you press on the material, how it kind of bounces back up? You want to make sure all of the powder gets wet, okay? Because that is how the polymer hydrates. Now, if you don't have an overhead, you would wet the product, or the polymer, sorry, and you would let it sit, okay? Now, Sepimax Zen can take up to 8 hours to fully hydrate if you do not have an overhead. So again, this is why I would make them in the evening, because I could just let it sit overnight and in the morning come in and start whisking. Because I do have an overhead, I can hydrate this in about 15 minutes. I'm going to put it under my overhead at a fairly low RPM. For those of you that aren't familiar with RPM and what it means, it's a lower speed. I will cover equipment pretty soon. I'm going to do a video and I'll show you the different types of shear and just the different equipment that you can use, what different shafts are used for, so that when you do get to the point that you want to invest in some more expensive and more professional equipment, you kind of are doing that with a little bit of education behind you as to what you're purchasing, so that you don't waste your money, because I did. Okay, so I'm going to put this under my overhead for 15 minutes with a propeller shaft. I'm going to do this at 450 RPM, which is fairly low, and then towards the end I will increase it, which I will also put on video for you guys. Okay, so you can see that stirring. It's not too, I don't want to turn it up too much, because that's going to incorporate air into the product, and then of course we will get those bubbles again. We want to try to get as few bubbles as possible while this hydrates. Okay, so this is about 30 minutes later, and this polymer is hydrated. I'm going to turn it up a little bit now and let it mix for another 3 to 4 minutes, and then we will take it out and get it bottled.